Well, hey, good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? I am feeling a little embarrassed. You know, you were working on a sermon, you write the sermon, and then at some point you realize, oh, this is going to be public. This is with other people, and that moment is right now for me, realizing that. So I'm a little bit embarrassed because I wish that this story had happened like when I was a little child, but it didn't. I was a grown man when this happened. I had borrowed my mom's vehicle to do this errand, and I was backing around a corner, which I guess I don't do very often. I did it once during the test, and then I think this was the only time after. Anyways, I'm making excuses now. What I had done, I scraped the side of the vehicle on a fence. And, you know, you get into that moment where you're like, oh, no, and then you're like, if I go forward, it's worse, and if I go backwards, anyways, I scraped the side of the vehicle. And in that moment, this shame voice rose up fiercely inside of me, and it said, "You little screw up. You're such a little boy. You better run and hide. Why don't you tell your mommy that someone else did it?" And I did. I called my mom, and I told her that I had come back out of the store and that someone had scratched her vehicle. And you know what she said? "Oh no, that's terrible." "Well, it's just a vehicle, honey. As long as you're okay, that's what matters." And then we hung up. And what I had done, not the dent, not the scratching, but telling my mother, lying to the woman who gave birth to me, it sat like an elephant on my chest. And I tried to wrestle it off for the next hour or so, but it just got heavier, and it just got heavier. And I thought, like, who would I become? What would become of our relationship if I just kept going without telling the truth, without apologizing, right? And I thought, what would become of our relationship if I did tell the truth? It felt like a bind. You know, apologies they're like a kind of a unicorn these days. You hear about them in old stories. You think, yeah, they probably existed at one time, but you imagine they're just kind of extinct in the wild. And there's plenty of bad apologies out there. I mean, you could probably think of a ton of them right now, right? Athletes, actors, politicians, they used to do a lot of bad apologizing publicly. It was only whenever they got caught in their bad behavior and their careers were on the line. And those apologies usually ever amount to, "Gosh, I'm sorry you took it the wrong way." Bad apologies, they're not actually apologies, right? They're just public relations damage control. You've probably received some of these. But I don't know, I don't even think we see bad apologies anymore. Nowadays, it's just common to double down on the justification for offending behavior. That seems to be the trend today. And I'm not even sure that we learned how to offer a meaningful apology. And kids are just kind of told, like, "Say you're sorry." "I'm sorry." As if it's kind of this magic spell to bring order back to chaos, right? So, but learning to apologize, it's vital to a kind of soul hygiene. Who do we become? Who do we become if we do not practice? And it is a practice, right? It's something that we can become better at. Who do we become if we don't practice not only forgiveness, but also apologizing? So this morning, I want to take a look at another angle around our topic regarding forgiveness. 2 weeks ago, Sarah set the table for us to enjoy this potluck of forgiveness. Each person who comes to the table is going to bring a little something different, but related. And last week, my friend Bill Clark shared his journey with his dad. Wasn't that great? That was such a courageous story. And today I want to bring a dish to the table called the anatomy of an apology. And I don't have the clicker, so I'm just going to have to, okay? And let me stress, this is not a master class, okay? This is like entry-level stuff. This is apologizing for dummies. It's important for us to start at the beginning here because I don't know that we've had a lot of experience giving or receiving apology. And I think they're one of the most terrifying things that you can do. So this is more like a workshop than a kind of sermon-y sermon, all right? So this means I want to put some practical tools in your hands with the intent that you'll practice your apology skills as an experiment this week. Dun, dun, dun. Why? Why? Because the God that I know who exists in the Trinity is all about relationship. And we're not going to be in relationships very long without the repair that comes, hopefully, with apology. Why? Because the God I know in the cross of Jesus is all about the death of the false ego. And apologies, real apologies, take us to that same place of death and new life. And that is a source of major spiritual growth. So if you're kind of feeling like, man, I am really stuck and you're stagnant in your spiritual growth, this might be what the doctor orders, okay? So that's the invitation. Make this practical, something that you can practice in real life this week. You might already have a situation in mind. As soon as we started talking about apology, you thought, oh crap, I'm going to have to deal with that. Okay, that's good. I've got one. Maybe you have one. Maybe you have something to work with already. But I also want to invite you to start small in this. You are training your apology muscle, okay? So don't start with the 50-pound weights first. Start with the 5-pound weight first and work your way up. I want you to think of something small, an apology that you can practice on. Perhaps it's something annoying, some annoying thing that you do that irritates your partner or your coworker or maybe even your children or a friend. Maybe it's something like showing up late, talking over them in conversation, or withholding praise, or lying to them about scratching the side panel of their vehicle. We'll get back to that one, okay? So try to make it practical and personal. If you are a way better human being than me and you can't think of a situation that needs some repair, just follow along anyways on the handout that's in your bulletin. Go ahead and pull that out. Because here's the thing, since we're doing this right now, you know that God's going to provide you with the opportunity this week to live into it. So might as well do your homework now. It's just going to come up, okay? So Sarah, and if you need like a pen, we've got some coming around. And if you need like a little board to write on, we've got some of those too. This is going to be a working group today, okay? And don't worry, we're not going to share them with each other too, so you can, it's confidential there. Okay, and then for those of you playing on at home, Jason, can we provide this on the site, this resource? Okay, so this is going to be also on the site. So no, just observers, play along at home. Okay, anyone need anything for this? No? We're going to briefly cover these 5 steps of a meaningful apology. And I want to ask you to find your own words to express each of these steps. That's kind of your task this morning here. Apologies already feel foreign. They feel strange coming out of our mouths. So I want you to feel as comfortable as you possibly can. Find your own language of expression. So as we go, write in, try different things out, see what fits for you. Is everyone ready? Yeah? Okay. First step here is expressing empathy. A meaningful apology starts with empathetic sadness. We've taken the phrase, I'm sorry, and it's kind of now this abbreviated shorthand for an actual apology. I'm sorry kind of usually means, hey, I feel awkward, and I want this awkwardness to be over, so we good? Sorry usually means just please excuse my behavior, right? But the root of the word sorry is actually sorrow. It's empathetic sadness. And empathetic sadness is an essential place to start a meaningful apology. If at all possible, don't even start to apologize until you can access this. It will go way better, right? By empathy, here's what I don't mean, too. I don't mean I feel your pain, right? Because we can't feel the other person's pain. I'm not you. And it's a dangerous assumption to make. But we can feel our own emotions about another's pain, especially if we're part of the cause. So a meaningful apology starts when I'm able to bust through my defenses about hurting you and access how I really feel about it. So if we can, let's strike the words "I'm sorry" from our apology vocabulary until those words are reinvested with meaning. We can do better than that, right? We can talk about our sadness. I imagine the pain you might be feeling, and I feel terrible about it. I can see you're upset. I'm disappointed in how I treated you. I care about you more than that, right? We got to start here. I'm sad that you're sad. Without this step of entering a place that takes the hurt seriously, the other steps, I think they lose their meaning. So if you need to, wait until you can get to a genuine degree of sorrow in order to offer a truly sincere apology. How would you phrase that? How would you phrase that in your own words? Try to capture it on your worksheet as you're thinking about that scenario, or that scenario that comes up frequently for you and someone else that will probably come up this week, maybe. That's the first one. Express empathy. Here's the second one. The next one is taking ownership. I want to own up to my failure of love. In the Catholic tradition, the Mass has this really dramatic confession, and like in the old days, like they would beat their chest as they said it. I have sinned through my fault, my own most grievous fault. This is like pretty dramatic, right? Pretty dramatic ownership. It's a liturgical rehearsal for taking ownership. And I think good liturgy does that, right? It's a rehearsal for the deepest parts of life, like telling the truth about ourselves, even when it's not pretty. And this one is really hard because I think it feels like we're giving fuel for the other person to destroy us. Like I'm incriminating myself. I'm a goner. I'm done for, right? And I think this is the hardest part for me, taking ownership. The urge in me to defend, it's so strong. Because, hey, like this didn't happen, this breakdown didn't happen in a vacuum. There's a very important context here that needs to be considered, right? And if we're all telling the truth, I was only reacting to something that you did, and I'd be happy to show you the list. I've got it right here. Relationship researcher John Gottman, he calls this blaming defensiveness lethal to any relationship. And he lists it as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the relational apocalypse, because it's a sign that the end of relationship is drawing nigh. Blaming defensiveness. So let's be clear. Ownership is not saying that the other person doesn't share in the responsibility for the problem. Rather, ownership says, look, I can only take responsibility for myself. Ownership acknowledges that there's a proverbial log in my eye. Therefore, it's impossible for me to accurately judge what anyone else's role is because, gosh, my vision is just impaired. But what I do see most clearly is what's blocking my view. I can own that. So what words, then? What words would you use? Be brief, be to the point, but start to formulate your ownership. Don't over-own, right? Don't take ownership of things that don't belong to you. That's not helpful either. Don't steal the other person's soul hygiene work from them. That's only theirs to do. But what can you tell the truth about yourself here? The psalmists, the psalmists do this so well. They love to live in transparency with God. They love to be seen by God, and they sing it and they pray it all the time. It's like in Psalm 32. Let's read this together, if you can see it. What happiness for those whose guilt has been forgiven. What joys when sins are covered over. What relief for those who have confessed their sins, and God has cleared the record. There was a time when I wouldn't admit my faults, and my dishonesty made me miserable and filled my days with frustration. All day, all night, your hand was heavy on me. My strength evaporated like water on a sunny day, until I finally admitted all my sins to you and stopped trying to hide them. I said to myself, I will confess them to the Lord. And you forgave me. My guilt is gone. Okay, you got something written in your handout for this one? Taking ownership. Number 3 is offering restitution. This kind of sounds like a scary word. Restitution simply means the willingness to pay. The willingness to repay, to make right, to return what's been taken. It's not always possible, right? Some things are not repayable. Some things you just can't put a price on it. Some things just take time to return, like trust. But I can take the stance that says, man, I am willing to do what it takes to repair things. If some kind of act of service can do that, man, I'll do that. If there's a monetary value on it, I'll pay that. If replacing something can do it, I'll do that. Whatever it takes to help make things right, that's what I want to do. Whatever might help bring equality to the situation, I want to do that. So specific to your situation, what might you say? What might you say in your apology? This is the restorative part. It means that you got real skin in the game, right? It's not just lip service. So what might you do? What might you do to offer restitution? This next one, this fourth one is, I don't think it's considered very often. It's to express a plan of prevention. So I feel so bad about this. I know I'm responsible. I'm willing to restore what's been lost if possible. And I don't want to do this to you again. Here's how. Can you see how each part of the apology is a rebuilding of trust, of relational trust here? Each piece of this apology, when genuine, says to the other person, I want to invite you to trust me again. But kind of, like repeat offense, flagrant repeat offenses, that just tears trust down in an instant. Repeat offense, it also reveals our addictions, really, right? Our inability to do otherwise. To not do the thing that we want to do. So how? How will this not become the pattern that we live in? How will we create a new pattern? Man, I was awestruck last week when I heard a man say in front of this congregation, I didn't want to repeat the sins of my father. So everyone in my family knew and was given permission to say, Dad's anger is his problem. And then we made a family system that I would pay money to my kids if my anger got between us. And I went to a therapist and I talked with other men about my problem of anger. Wow. That was a plan. Wasn't that amazing? Prevention says, if you decide to trust me again, I will make great efforts for this not to happen again. A plan of prevention is the fourth one. Do you have something for that? A way to think about that? And here's the last one. The last one is asking forgiveness. This is the part that kind of everyone wants to jump to, but it's last. And maybe it's the toughest part because it's the part that I have no control over whatsoever. I ask, will you forgive me of this? And then all I can do is wait. It's just out of my hands. The most perfect apology in the world does not entitle me to your forgiveness. I may have just like sorrow spilling out everywhere. I may have owned every minute detail of the offense. I may have paid back every possible last restitution and created a detailed plan for prevention, but that does not give me the right to forgiveness. Because forgiveness it's just always a grace. Forgiveness is always just a gift. They're free to forgive or not to forgive me. And that's their choice. It's their business. But in the end, it's not dependent upon how well I've asked for it. It will depend on whether they decide to forgive. And that takes time, a lot of time. The 12-step journal in AA, it says this. I really like this. We need to be open to any response we get from people we've injured and be ready to accept their response without becoming angry. And we're not there to manipulate them into forgiving us. In order to have this come off smoothly, we should make every effort to purge our bad feelings toward the person or incident before we meet to speak. This is going to help us resist the temptation to point out to them what we felt they did to provoke us. We're only there to talk about our own behavior. That kind of covers each of the steps, doesn't it? So, I knew that I had to call my mom back. I knew that I had to tell the truth. An apology was like oxygen in the relationship, and it had to happen to live. But it also just felt like jumping off a bridge. I was terrified. Would I survive it? I called her back up, and my apology sucked. It was not a 5-point apology. But it was the best I could do at the time. And it was sincere. And I didn't know what would happen next. And my mom said to me, Ryan, there's just nothing that you can do to make me love you less. There's nothing you can do. And there's nothing that you can do to make me love you more. Not every apology is going to go that way. And in a way, it doesn't matter what people do with our apologies. That's up to them. We apologize because it's who we are, because we're cultivating a sense of honor and integrity within us. And we apologize because we are a forgiven people that belong to a merciful God. When it comes to real life, I know none of us are going to go through this rigid list of apologizing to someone. But the idea here is that if we're able to practice apologizing and experience it, it will become part of our tools of reconciliation. We'll know what it means to be a person who can humble themselves and apologize, not in a PR save face kind of way, but in a way that cultivates reconciliation. And that is what I hope for our community. That we become just like rampant apologizers. That we can be honest about mistakes and failures. That we can open the door to reconciliation, which is the work of Jesus that we're called to do. Will you pray with me? And I want you to hold that worksheet in your hands. as we pray, because it represents more than a few tips on how to apologize, right? It represents your heart towards another. It represents the work of reconciliation in the world. It represents the relational work of God. So, Holy Trinity, we ask that you would bless this work. Give us good courage to do the thing that scares us, trusting that you're with us, that you are the great healer of the world, and that we belong to you. Whatever comes this week, we are yours, and you love us. Amen to that? All right, I can't wait to hear what happens this week. Will you bring back some stories this week? Will you bring them back? All right.